Hey, welcome everybody. It's time once again for another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. So we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving the market today and the best solutions going forward. With the best man I know to talk about it, Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul. Thanks. We're back here again to talk more real estate. I'm Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company and Barry Saywitz Properties. And in my 30 plus years in commercial real estate, I've been on all sides of the deal as a buyer and a seller, as a landlord and a tenant, as a principal and a broker. And what I've learned is to take a hard look at both sides of the real estate transaction to come up with the best solutions in trying to navigate the market's ebbs and flows. And today, no different. We're back here again. Welcome to our viewers and our listeners out there. Today's shout out, I want to give to everyone sort of a pre-holiday, happy holidays, healthy and prosperous new year to everyone, regardless of what holiday you celebrate and religion you are. It's a time to give thanks and to be with family and to appreciate the things that we have, and to look ahead to hopefully what is a better new year going forward. In addition, I want to also give a shout out to our Southern California sports teams, the Chargers and the Rams, both doing very well. UCLA, USC basketball, both doing very well. So we hope that continues for everyone. But let's shift gears and let's talk a little real estate. Let's sort of recap, since today is the last show of our calendar year. We've covered a lot of ground over the last 3 months in doing the show and gotten a lot of great input from a bunch of folks in different sectors of the market. And so our goal today was to sort of regroup, figure out what we've covered, hopefully share with people a summary of what we've learned and what they can take looking forward into the year to come.
Well, and I get to do something I never do the rest of the year, which is talk.
Yeah, so we have no guest here today. I'm host, guest, talker, whatever. You're stuck with me and Paul. So.
And I'm the Wizard of Oz. I'm over in the control room, so you don't get to see me. You just get to see Barry answering. I'm going to put Barry on the hot seat today here.
That's it.
You didn't bring the crystal ball, though. I don't see it sitting on the table here. So.
No, I've got it in my mind, and whatever I don't know, I'm just going to make it up as we go along. I figure that's...
Well, just make it up. That's all. That seems to be what many are trying to do. Here's what I like about the show. I just want to take 1 minute and thank you. When we imagined this show a couple of months ago, this turned out to be everything I could have imagined and more, which is some really interesting conversations about the one topic that seems to be on everybody's mind in Southern California, the state of real estate. Is there anything that drives Southern California's success more than real estate? And is that still the case, commercial real estate?
Yeah, no, I mean, commercial real estate's a big driver in the market. Obviously, as we've heard from a multitude of our guests, there are a lot of other factors that go into that. And there are a lot of different aspects of the commercial real estate market that make up when somebody says, hey, what is commercial real estate? So these are the kinds of conversations that I have with people all the time. And if I go to lunch or have coffee with someone and we sort of kick the ball around and talk about what's going on, I'm glad we've been able to get this on the air and get expert advice from different people, some of whom I know and have done business with, and others I've met for the first time. And it's just been a great experience so far, and I'm looking forward to the year ahead.
So here's a couple of the takeaways I've had as I've listened to the first 3 months of episodes. And I got to tell you, in all sincerity, I'm not just saying this because I get a kick out of the show and I'm thrilled you're doing it. I get a takeaway every week. There is a little nugget out of every show that I ask. We sit here for a half hour and discuss, and I say, really? You said this during the show? Here's a couple of them that I wrote down that just come to mind. One is that the big bust that we were all expecting a year ago probably ain't coming. It may, I'm not saying never, but the giant foreclosure bust that we thought was going to happen, the giant crash in prices because of COVID and all these forces it unleashed, I don't see it or hear it. Everybody seems pretty confident in the coming year.
Yeah, and you haven't really had anybody who's been a guest on the show talk about they're fearful of a big bust.
No.
I think there's bigger picture things that people are fearful of, whether it's taxes, whether it's government spending, whether it's supply chain, whether it's jobs, stock market, interest rates. So those are all things that are ultimately going to play a part in how the market develops going forward. But the idea that if you were sitting on the sidelines waiting for the crash,
Right.
I don't see that either, and nobody else has really put that on the table.
We've had so many people. I'm going to replay episodes from a year ago, the Christmas 2020, not 2021. People were fearful what this was going to do to the housing market, what it was going to do to the commercial real estate market in particular. Hotels. Was there ever a more devastated industry during COVID than the hotel industry and the hospitality industry?
Yeah, and now it's back, bigger and hopefully better than ever. And so it'll be interesting as we go forward to see how the markets develop, whether they continue at the pace that they have been. And really, for me, the biggest underlying factor going forward, as I sit here today, is inflation and
Yeah,
how that
right.
plays into the entire economy, people's spending habits, people's what they charge for goods and services. In our business alone, there is almost no vendor that we haven't seen some kind of a price increase from. And in many instances, I talked to somebody about our air conditioning vendor said they had 4 increases for supplies
Wow.
in the last 90 days, or the flooring vendor who does carpet and flooring who said they have 3 price increases and a labor increase and a trip charge, and you're paying $5 plus for a gallon of gas here in California.
And
so
waiting 4 months for the HVAC part to arrive.
yeah. And so to me, those are things that every day affect people's lives and how that goes. And so I think if we look back at what we've learned and what we've talked about here over the last 3 months, I think you have to take it in pieces.
All right, well, let's break down some of those pieces. Let's start with the one we mentioned, the one that was hit the hardest by COVID. That you had a guest. Remind me who your guest was that came in. He certainly was one of the top experts in this area in the hospitality market. And what takeaway you got for his appearance?
Yeah, well, so Bob Olson was here from R.D. Olson a couple of weeks ago and was talking about the fact that while certainly that industry was crushed and devastated and challenges and still have challenges with employees and supply chain issues, from a standpoint of the fact that their occupancy is now back to equal or getting to be greater occupancy than pre-COVID would tell you something. It tells
Yeah.
you, I mean, to me, it tells me, number one, especially here in Southern California, I don't know about other places, people want to get away and people want to get out and people are sick of being at home. So you have people that are locals to Southern California that want to come to Orange County or other places in Southern California to get away. You have people that are in the Midwest and the East Coast that want to get out of the cold, and so they come here. And you have people that are afraid to travel internationally or can't because some of these countries are just flat out closed at this
Right.
point. So it all feeds to domestic travel, and that helps areas in the Sun Belt and in touristy areas like Orange County, and that's what he was saying.
Two other things. One from his show, and then we had another guy that came in. I'll feed into this in a second here. So the other thing was their company. Is it R.D. Olson? Did I get it correct here?
Yeah.
They're the guys not only that build large hotels and own some hotels. What do they own? What's the big one here in Newport Beach? I forgot they own.
Well, they own the Mayor's Table, and they have the Paseo in Huntington Beach, and then they're also doing the redevelopment in Dana Point Harbor.
That was what I was thinking about. Dana Point Harbor, this thing that's sort of quietly moving forward. I think it's going to have a huge impact to tourism here, at least in South Orange County. They're talking about redoing this harbor that goes back to what, the 60s or 50s or 70s.
Yeah, and I drove there yesterday. I went for a ride, and
I actually did, based on your show. I drove down there just to see what.
yeah, not only the harbor, but everything across from the harbor, all the new apartments and condos that are going up there that are all walking distance to what is going to be this new entertainment sort of destination place. So, I mean, and I think that's a theme that we talked about on a number of episodes where people came in, whether it's the industrial market, whether it's the apartment market, and talked about redevelopment for highest and best use, right? And there
Right.
is a theme in real estate. There's two themes. One, you will migrate to the highest and best use. Secondly, location, location, location. So when you talk about a location that is great and you have an older, antiquated building that is not the highest and best use, you're going to see redevelopment and you're going to see improvement to the area.
I guess what I expected is rethinking, though, because these plans were put in place years ago. It takes a long time, especially that one. Got to go through the Coastal Commission, everything else. And yet they're not rethinking it based on the realities of COVID and today.
No, because I think everybody that we talk to, regardless of the different sectors, you have to look long term, right? And you're not looking in the window of the next 6 to 12 months. You have to look further out than that. And so the kinds of themes that people were putting in place before COVID, maybe they were extended, or maybe they were exacerbated by COVID, and some of the concepts of adding amenities and outdoor areas to whether it's apartments or office buildings or hotels, and flow and upgrades and things like that are now even more important going forward. But the concept, you're still looking at it in a much longer window than what we expect here. The difficulty is there's no question as we sit here today and we look at it, you still have COVID issues, and they're still continuing to put a drag on the economy. They're continuing to put fears in people about whether this Omicron variant is going to be worse or better or more contagious or not a big deal. And so I think those are all things that are going to play into what happens going forward.
And maybe it doesn't go away. That's the fear, is that this is the new normal. It's mass, it's limited crowding, it's a lot more outdoor space. Talk about that a little bit. He surprised me too when he was saying about how many people have said COVID didn't change things. It just accelerated the change that was already happening.
Well, that could be. I mean, look, you still have, and I don't want to sound like a CNN or a Fox and we get political and talk about vaccines. Everybody's got their own opinion on whether to get a vaccine or not get a vaccine, or go outside, or how you go outside, or how you interact with other people. The fact of the matter is it has an impact, but there are certain segments of the market out there that say to themselves, I have to move forward. I have to go on. Right? I cannot have this stymie my entire lifestyle, and I will take precautions. And so, you may be getting a booster every 6 months, and it may be just like the flu.
Like the flu.
It really is kind of a bad case of the flu, and much more deadly for sure. But if you accept it, and you accept that that's part of life, at least for the short term, you have to get back to business, right? And we've talked about this in our own conference room with our own staff, and basically saying, look, you can't this is not March or April or May of 2020 where the entire economy is shut down. There are things happening around you, and you need to get out there, and you need to mix it up, and you need to get involved, because otherwise it will pass you by.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so one of the takeaways, I'll get off the hotels in a second here. One of the other takeaways I heard from him was, and this didn't necessarily have to do with COVID, but it may have been accelerated by COVID, was this rethinking of how hotels, corporate hotels, think their event space. Used to be, I never really thought about it, they were all interior. It's somewhere inside the building. Now more and more they're trying to rethink them so that they extend out into the courtyard and into the bigger area. It's not just packing a bunch of people into the room. And it's not just because of COVID that they've been rethinking that.
Yeah, no, that's, again, a function of amenities and a function of how you're addressing whether it's a wedding or a big group or an event, or just people's idea of walking around the gardens or the open areas of the hotel. And I don't want to get stuck up on the hotel piece, but that dovetails into the apartment sector.
That's what I was going to go to.
Yeah, where you have, there's no question in our apartment portfolio that in a property with a private yard, a property with a front yard, a property with outdoor courtyard, even if it's shared, is much more valuable and desirable to a tenant than I just have a tiny little balcony and I have no outdoor space. People like to get out, especially in an area where you can enjoy it 12 months out of the year.
Yes.
If it was cold and snowing, it's not that big of a deal, I guess. But I don't want to walk out onto a 2-foot patio. I'd like to be able to go in my yard and put some flowers and make it nice and have a little outdoor seating area. And so you're seeing apartment buildings, new stuff, have much more common areas and open areas and rooftop decks and bocce ball and badminton courts and volleyball courts and things like that.
I see it here in this building. We're at UCI's Applied Innovation Center. They have a spectacular event space, and it all flows outside. It's not just interior here. And that was what was happening in the real estate residential real estate market for years, bringing the outside in, or rather the inside out. I don't know which way to describe it.
Sure, with the sliding doors and the invisible doors and those kinds of things.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
You see it, well, you're talking about it here is office buildings, right? So you have office buildings with outdoor putting greens or outdoor picnic areas or barbecue areas or even outdoor meeting space. So those are things that were already put in place and were accelerated by COVID. And I think it's now more important and it's more at the forefront of necessity rather than a nice to have.
So let's shift to office for a second. The other one that everybody fears. As we've all learned to work from home, what does that do to the potential of office buildings like the one we're in here?
Yeah.
Will they just refill up because we're going to keep growing new businesses? Or will we rethink the floor plans and get rid of the big shared common area spaces with lots of little cubicles that Google and everything popularized here and go back to individual enclosed offices? Or will we not need any or many enclosed offices? It'll just be hot desks that you swap once in a while when you need a conference room and a desk.
Well, that's like 5 questions in one, but I'll try and answer. So, I think it really depends. What you have to see first, the office segment of the commercial market seems to be the struggler at the moment. Industrial through the roof, apartments through the roof, right? Hotels back on track. And so the office market has to recover. And the way it recovers is people get back to work, and it's going to be slow and steady. However, I've seen a number of articles with regards to absorption of vacancy across the country and here in Southern California, where the trend is that the vacancy is going down, which means more people are getting back to work. I still think that our guest Dave Colton, who came on, had some very good points, where he said that as people's leases come up, they will rethink the kind of space, the amount of space, the design of space that they had, which will cause change. Whether that is taking less space or different space, it's going to cause change and movement, and you're going to continue to see that over the next 12 to 24 months as leases roll. And then in addition to that, you still have this issue of if some people are not coming back to work at all, if some people are going to do part-time in the office, part-time out of the office, what does that do for need for office space? And then that gets back to, okay, so how quickly is that segment going to recover?
And what is an office space at that point? Is it a place to plant everybody and supervise them, or is it a place that they come and go throughout the week?
And again, I think that just depends on your business. It depends on the type of business you're in, and I think it depends on the business owner and the executives of the company and what their policy is. I talk to guys and women who run and own businesses, and they say, I have to have my employees in the office. I need the synergy. I need them around people that whatever it is that we do or make, I need them there. I can't afford to have them not in the office. I have other people that I've spoken to said, I can't afford to tell somebody they have to come to the office. I'd rather just let them work from home than lose them or have them go someplace else. I have other people we've spoke to that said, I could care less as long as they get their job done. It really doesn't matter to me.
Well, I thought it was interesting. I had to say with a little smile, maybe I'm reading something into this, but you had Dave Colton in here, who at one time I think was the largest owner of office buildings in Orange County.
Second, because you always have the Irvine Company.
Oh, the Irvine Company, yeah. So, I mean, he had, 100 of them or something, quite a lot of them. And he's almost sold all of them off. So is that looking ahead saying it's time to cut loose and let somebody else figure this out? Or is it just, hey, I've had my run, let somebody else have a whack at it?
Yeah, I mean, look, his exit strategy, I think, was put into place far before COVID. And then when COVID hits, his game plan looks even more spectacular than it was when he put it into place.
Right.
At the same time, what you also heard him say is, I'm not done. And so what he's saying is, look, if there's a good buy out there and it makes sense, then I'm a player. And I think that applies to a lot of people out there. There's still a lot of money out in the investment market, still people looking for opportunity, whatever that means. It just becomes more difficult in the short term with COVID, because that opportunity gets masked by the fact that there may be all these additional issues. And in the office market, certainly the case. And I think, what I read into what he was saying is that his crystal balls, I think he figures there will be some people that will struggle, people that paid too much, paid top dollar, that can't see their way out or find their way out. And maybe it's not a fire sale, but there's opportunities to buy things.
Because it's not going to meet the pro forma that they put in place to borrow against.
Or investment groups or foreign owners that dump the cash that said, gee, this is really not what I signed up for. I want to get into industrial. I want to get into apartments. What do? I dump the office space and I get into something else where I got a better opportunity. So I think it really depends. But the office market, from what we heard from our guests and what we're hearing out in the marketplace, seems to be the trailer behind the others. And if we shift gears for a second to the industrial, just absolute opposite, which is that industrial rents through the roof. We, on our own brokerage side, are talking to business owners and CEOs and CFOs about their leases and about their occupancy costs. And it's just a shell shocker for some of these people who signed a lease 5 years ago, and their rent might have gone up 3 or 4% a year with some annual escalation, except that the market went up 10 to 15% a year. And if you compound that over a 3 to 5 year period, you are now 40% below market. And then when you go and look for other opportunities out in the market, the vacancy is 1%. So I can't even find anything, even if I wanted it. And I don't really have much to pick from. And so what do I have to do? I have to stay and renew the lease. And then how do I try and mitigate the big exposure that I'm going to get, which goes right to the bottom line if you're a business owner?
Yeah.
More rent means less profit for the company.
Which means everything goes up and it continues this spiral that we're so afraid of, this inflation catching hold and not just being a temporary. Yes, there was a lot of cash infused, a massive amount, trillions of amount, which is going to spark some inflationary pressures here, more dollars.
And what we heard from our guest a couple of weeks ago, Steve Pearson, who has his finger on the pulse of the industrial market, is you have people paying more for an industrial building than they would pay for an office building, which seems crazy, except that people are still doing it. Why? Because there is demand. And they believe that the industrial rents will continue to increase going forward. And so if you believe that you're still on an upward trend, then buying, even though it's at a premium, might still be a good deal. And so if you rewind and said, hey, the guy who bought an industrial building 12 or 24 months ago, who paid a premium, who bought something at the top of the market in the middle of COVID, what are you thinking? That guy's a hero today because the market kept moving up.
Yeah.
And then that guy goes, hey, I made a bunch of money, or I made a very good deal.
And you made another point in there that didn't occur to me, but I guess it's why I listened to this show. It was talked about inside baseball, the mindset of an investor. So, and talk a little bit about the difference between triple net rents, which is what you typically get in an industrial space or retail space, and then just a regular rent like you get in an office space here where the landlord absorbs all that. That uncertainty in the future of what taxes will be, what the cost of everything will be. In a triple net, that just gets passed along to the tenant, so I got no worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the tenant winds up paying for the increase in the operating expenses of the building one way or the other. In a full-service gross lease, the rent includes all of the taxes, the operating expenses, the janitorial costs, and all of that.
Right.
But there's also a clause in the lease that says that you have a base year, and the base year is whatever the first year is of your lease. And then if the costs increase in year 2, you will pay your pro rata share of the increase only above the base year, if that makes sense. A little real estate 101
Okay.
for our viewers and our listeners, and for you too, Paul.
Yeah.
So get your pen out, take some notes.
I'm trying to figure this out.
It'll be a quiz later. We can do another show on this one. But,
Yes.
but the fact of the matter is, if I own an office building, and Paul, you rent from me, and your rent is, let's just pick a number, $2 a square foot,
Okay.
and you rent 3,000 square feet, your rent, 3,000 times $2 a square foot, $6,000 a month. That includes everything. That includes the lights. That includes the janitor. That includes the taxes, the insurance, in the first year of the lease. In the second year of the lease, if my expenses as the landlord go up, then I pass that expense above last year's expense to you. So in your $6,000 a month that you pay, I might be incurring, let's just say, $100,000 of cost to run the whole building.
Right.
And if the $100,000 in cost goes up to $102,000,
Because the janitors charge more.
because the
parts
taxes go up, the
yeah.
insurance goes up, the
Right.
janitor, right? Well, and in this case, in COVID, everything goes up,
Everything
and
goes up.
everything doesn't go up by just a simple cost of living.
No.
It goes up by more than that, right? So historically, if you looked at what a cost of living increase would have been pre-COVID, it averages about 3%. In some years, it was 2
And you
something.
could plan for that as the owner of that office building, or you anticipated that.
Sure, and even as a tenant as well, you could
Right.
assume that my expenses are not going to run away. As an owner, my expenses are not going to run away. So that you wouldn't think that the janitor would come back to you and say, I need a 15% increase.
Right.
But except he comes back and says, I have a labor cost increase, I have a tax increase myself, I have a supply increase
I
because
can't get
the
people.
soap,
I can't get the supplies. I
well-
can't get people. I can't get anything.
and soap, and right, the landscaper comes back and says, hey, a bag of seed today costs $120 for a bag, and that same bag a year ago cost $40.
Yeah.
So I'm going to charge you triple the cost plus some additional labor. So these are ridiculous increases percentage wise, and at the end of the day, the tenant winds up picking up some or all of that increase. So whether you have office space or whether you have industrial space, it's going to get passed on to you at the end of the day, and nobody's happy about it. And
So I was just going to say, so what I'm hearing is that people are, if I'm going to buy an office building today or an industrial building, why not buy an industrial building? Because I have no worry. That's just going to pass it on to the tenant.
Well, yes and no. I mean, true that that's the case, except that if I buy an industrial building, it's still got a pencil for me, right? And
Yeah.
so when I go to buy the industrial building, the return is going to be less than an office building because the demand for it is much higher and the market's very tight. And so pick your poison. It's really a question of, look, if you're buying it to flip it or sell it in a year or two or three, it's a different mentality than if I'm going to buy it and hold it for 30 years. And so you heard Dave Colton talk about, and you heard, I don't know, 4 or 5 different guests basically say the same thing, which is if you buy with the intent to hold long term, it really doesn't matter.
Yes.
Because 30 years from now, it's not going to matter what that bag of seed was or what that bottle of soap was today. You're looking at the investment from a long term. If you hold out for the deal of the day, you will be holding out for a long, long time. It's no different than the first-time home buyer who says, I want to go in and I'm going to undercut and I'm going to get myself a deal and, I need to pay less than market. And then
buy at
after
the bottom of the market and sell high.
Yeah, but after you get boxed out 5 or 6 times, and then you're like desperate, and now you're back to overbidding, right? And then now you just like, I want it. And so these are different trends in the market. And the real question, I think, in 2022 is, will these kinds of runaway costs, runaway prices, and runaway values start to flatten out as interest rates go up, as supply chain issues hopefully mitigate, and you get some stability? Because at the moment, you have cost of living that came out the other day and said is 6.8%.
Highest in 40 years.
Right. So if you had an office or an industrial lease that had a 3% annual increase, right, you'd be selling yourself short as the landlord. You'd be better off coming back to the tenant and saying, I'm just going to, whatever the cost of living is, that's what I'm going to stick you with, right? And then as a tenant, you get stuck with 7% cost of living increase. Next year, it might be 5, versus if you were a tenant, you'd say, no, I just want to do 3%. And if the landlord agreed to it, you should take it and run in this market. Right now, if you rewind and you look at what the cost of living increase was for 2020 while we had COVID, it was 1.2%. So if you average the 1.2 and the 6.8, you're still around 4% or something like that. And so it really depends. But you have to educate yourself, and you have to make decisions on a long-term basis. You can't get stuck in the window.
So last 2 questions. Does that change the short-term nature of leasing, whether it's an industrial or an office or whatever you're leasing here, both from the landlord and the tenant side? You've been on both sides of the deal, which is what I'm hearing over and over again. People are making short-term deals until this thing straightens itself out.
Yeah, yes and no.
The tenant wants to make a long-term deal.
It depends. I mean, we have tenants that are just shell-shocked, that are gun-shy, that want short-term leases, and then say, hey, even in our own portfolio, we have tenants that go, look, I'm still reeling from COVID. I mean, a year ago, I didn't even know if I was going to make it.
Right.
So how could I talk to you about a 10-year lease? Give me 2 more years, and I'll try and get my head screwed back on.
Right.
The issue is, does the landlord want to do that, or does he want to pin you into a longer lease because he knows the market is hot? Or does the landlord think the market's going to keep running up, and I'll do your 2-year lease?
Exactly.
And in 18 months, I'm going to raise it even more.
Right.
And if you're still around, I'll know you're doing well, so you can pay it.
If you're not, I'll take the next one because the demand's still hot. All right, so that was one question, and it sounds like that is kind of in flux, and nobody's sure. Nobody knows what to do with that play. Do I go short? Do I go long? Either the landlord or the tenant. It depends.
And I think that's a whole nother show we'll probably do in the first part of the year that I'd like to. The other thing is, for our viewers and our listeners out there, I guess what I want them to take away from what we've done so far this year, if they've been listening or watching along, or if you're just listening for the first time today, the takeaway I think for going into 2022 is you have to try and apply what is going on around you to your own set of circumstances, to your own business, to your own financial needs, and then try and make the best decisions you can. We tell our clients all the time, you have to make an informed business decision based on gathering whatever information is available to you. And so that will make you, or will force you to make a smart business decision at the end of the day. And hopefully we shed a little bit of light. I wish I had a crystal ball to see where it ends up, but the other factors that I would caution people on looking for, that in our own business model and strategy we look for, is the volatility and what is going to create volatility for us going forward.
Yes.
No question, supply chain, still a problem.
Okay, because that was going to be my last question. What? Give me a couple of quick things we got to look for. This will tell you where are we getting more volatile, or is it settling down?
Yeah, I mean, we have issues for supply chain for sure. I still can't get my presents, right? And let alone my bag of seed or my wood to make a fence or my air conditioning part all day long. The second is inflation. You still have runaway inflation. You still have everybody coming back and just raising. And now you have the threat of interest rates going up. Even if it's moderately going up, it will cause reaction in the marketplace. And then look at the volatility in the stock market, right? Up and down. I mean, it scares me. I'd be fine with little blips up and down. You could at least pace it. But
Yes.
400, 500, 600 points in a day, up or down one way or the other, means there's still lots of volatility. And when they come out with news about Omicron or Delta variant or this country shut down or the administration is going to go spend another $1 trillion or do something different, it just swings the markets. And so it's very hard for people to try and project where it's going to go.
What I don't hear is what everybody was afraid of a year ago when we changed administrations, which was the assumption that taxes would go up, business taxes would go up.
Well, I think the Republicans and COVID have done a good job of pushing out the strategy of that. And I think you'll see what happens in the midterm elections if that swings the House and or the Senate back the Republicans' way. You're going to have much less likelihood that you're going to see an increase in taxes. But you still have challenges, and you still have, we'll talk about it another day, but you still have challenges with hiring people. And how does that work?
Yes, that another one that wasn't on anybody's radar, the great resignation here.
So I would leave people with this in terms of a final thought, if there was
Yes.
a final thought for the year. A, enjoy yourselves and have a happy holiday. B, try and make yourself as educated as you can when you're making these kinds of real estate and business decisions. And then C, going forward into 2022, expect more uncertainty in the sense that there are going to be other factors that are going to come up. And you have to continue to march forward. You have to take forward steps in your business, in your personal life, in your investment strategy, and then try and put a plan in motion as best you can.
Only way I know to do that, tune in each and every week here to Orange County's only talk show where we talk, let's talk real estate. Thank you, Barry Saywitz, for putting this show together. I really think it's timely, and I look forward to hearing you pick this out, try and figure it out on the fly with some of the experts here in the community.
Yeah, and to our listeners and our viewers out there, we have some exciting shows for 2022. So stay tuned with us. Keep tuning in. We'll see you next year. Happy holidays, and we'll see you soon.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.